Well, I'm back. When Jack can't find a speaker, he asks me to come.
All right.
No. That is totally a joke. I know that Jack loves and respects me in every way. Alan, mentioned that I've been involved in the pro-life movement for a long time, since 1976. And I was a lot younger then. I got involved in the pro-life movement when I was 21. Let me revise it, 23. So still pretty young. For whatever reason, maybe it's my Italian temperament, maybe it's the people who influenced me early on in my pro-life work, but for whatever reason I was almost instantly attracted to activism. I think it's because I'm very impatient and I want to see results now, not 25 years now, kind of like a get her done attitude. So that means that you, right, activists, you have to go out and you have to make an issue out of it. You've got to do things. Make a nuisance of yourselves, and so on. So really, from the very start, I was nearly instantly attracted to activist pro-life work. See, I'm going to turn my own phone off. There we go. It's okay. When I was 24 years old, and I was a graduate student at Loyola University in Chicago, I met a guy named Joe Scheidler. And he's the one who is responsible for my life of crime. When I was 24 years old, going to Loyola, I had a little dungeon apartment, that's what I called it, the dungeon, in Rogers Park, which I talk about in the book. And this lovely woman from my parish, St. Ignatius Parish, invited me to go to a meeting, a pro-life meeting. So I had absolutely no idea what this was about, what the meeting was going to be, discussing or anything. I thought, well, no, it's pro-life, I'll go. So we went to the meeting, and lo and behold, Joe Scheidler was there, and he was organizing this thing called a sit-in. That's what we called it back in those days. We didn't even have the word rescue yet. So now I'm really dating myself. And Joe was kind of riding the crest of the rescue movement in the early days there, 1978 would have been the year. And he kind of thought, well, this activity is the way to go. And of course, a sit-in at an abortion clinic is not going to happen unless people are willing to risk getting arrested. Okay. So when the moment came, the moment of truth, so who here is willing to do that? I immediately raised my hand. I'm not kidding. I had totally no hesitations. Well, what excuse could I offer? I was not married. I had no children. I'm a college student. I can jump in with both feet. And this just was, to me, the proper response to abortion was defend the babies right then and there at the places where they're going to die. So my first arrest was in 1978 at the Concord Women's Health Services in downtown Chicago, which is now closed. Yeah, that's right. Took it a while to close, and by the way, I do talk about Concord, and I talk about that early rescue in my book, and the sidewalk counseling episodes that I had. I did a lot of sidewalk counseling outside of the Concord Women's Health Services with a woman who had had an abortion there. in 1975. My very good friend Donna Rozeski, she and I teamed up. She spoke fluent Spanish, never mind her last name. She spoke fluent Spanish, and we had so many successes talking women out of abortions outside of Chicago abortion clinics. And so I narrate some of those stories of what we did and how we did it and what it meant for us to do it. People ask me, why did you write this book? I almost don't like that question because I have a very simplistic, or let me say this, a simplistic sounding answer. The simplistic sounding answer to that question is, I wrote it to tell the truth. Here's how you have to kind of see it. It's as if there was a soldier and he went off to war and he saw things and he did things that were unbelievable, that no one would believe happened. And that person had the personal experience of these horrors of war. And then you got to tell somebody. You wouldn't believe what I saw. You wouldn't believe what I did. That's why I had to write this book. It's like I am that soldier. I went off to war. Well, we're still, unfortunately, fighting this war. Came back, saw things, did things. I have to tell you the truth. Abandoned, the untold story of the abortion wars it's a hard book. This is not a musical comedy. Okay? And I think that my book is unique and very different from truly anything that has been written on the subject of abortion in the last 40 years, because it rips off what I like to call the veneer of normalcy that cloaks our culture. All the while, 3,500 human beings are wiped off the face of the earth today and every day, and that's just the surgical abortions that happen in abortion clinics. But yet, everything still looks so darn normal. And the thing about the abortion issue, you cannot be disturbed by abortion unless you are willing to be disturbed by abortion. It has to affect you on a personal level. The unborn are not marching in the streets. They're not burning down neighborhoods. They're not lobbying in Congress. They're not rallying the media. They're not putting on events. You have to do it. So we are dealing, and I think this is one of the big problems we have as a movement. It's an innate problem. It's not a problem that we create. It's innate in the battle that we're fighting for the right to life. We have a victim class that is invisible. And we have a victim class that is very small. We have a victim class that is utterly silent. So we have to be bothered by abortion. Abortion has to bother us. We're not going to be deliberately thrown into the fight. We have to be willing to take that fight on for a hidden, silent, tiny, sometimes I'm talking really tiny, victim. That's why these Face the Truth tours like Defend Life organizers are so, I believe, so vital to our movement, to rip off that veneer of normalcy and get below that veneer, that facade, and show the truth of what is America really all about today. It is about the oppression of a people group, and here they are. And now you got to deal with it. Whether you like it or not, whether you're offended or not, you are confronted by that hidden, silent victim, and you have to make a decision. You have to make a response. And people, oh sure, there's all those apathetic people who drive their cars and look straight at, they know you're there. That's why they're doing that. Okay, so don't say, well, they're look how no, that's a sign that they are deliberately making a decision to ignore you, and that's a response. That's kind of how you have to see it. The book itself abandoned the untold story of the abortion wars. Here's advice for anyone who is wanting to become an author. If you want to make sure not to get your book published, write it on abortion. And then write it from a pro-life perspective. I've got to tell you, it has been a very, very long journey from the time I started writing this book to its publication, a period of 12 years. 2 years to write, 10 years to find a publisher. And a lot of Catholic Christian publishers turn me down flat. Well, I think it's not because it's a bad book. It's because it's a hard book. And you have to have a little sense of gutsiness. You have to be willing to deal with the gritty quality of what's presented in this narrative. And a lot of publishers, it's not really for us. Our readership is into, the light and bright stuff. And in fact, I got a rejection letter from a major Catholic publisher, a publisher that I still respect. And I even have their books on my shelves. They asked to see the manuscript. Very good, right? You always want a publisher to say, send me the manuscript. Now you've got your foot way in the door. And but then they responded to me about 6 months later. Our editorial committee seriously considered your work. But in the end, we decided we had to reject it. Why? It is too graphic and too emotionally intense for our audience. Well, we are dealing with abortion here. So there you go. So it was an uphill climb. And I have to give a lot of thanks to my good friend Jack Ames, because he was just in the right place at the right time and willing to do the right thing. Go grab a publisher that he found at a publishing fair. You got to see, and he knew about my book. I had sent him the manuscript, and he encouraged them to take a look at it. This was St. Benedict Press, and they said, sure, have her send it to us. And 2 months later, while I was, by the way, at one of your Face the Truth tours 2 years ago,
right here.
I got the call on this very cell phone. Okay, I'm not kidding. We want your manuscript very badly. Okay, no problem. It's yours. So, yeah, I'll get back to you. And I got to say, St. Benedict Press spared no expense. It's a beautiful book. It feels nice in your hands. It's got 16 color photos, a dust jacket that they put a great deal of time and effort into the design. This was kind of a controversial decision, but we went with it. So now it's finally out there. But the truth is, a book can be out there and still remain unread. So we got to not have that happen. This is, I hope, a contribution to ending abortion. Jack has called it the Uncle Tom's Cabin of the abortion issue. It's a beautiful endorsement. I'm going to talk to you about 3 lessons that are in this book. 3 stories, but embedded in these 3 stories are 3 lessons. 3 things that I, as a pro-life activist leader, learned by experience. The first lesson has to do with a sidewalk counseling episode in Chicago at the Albany Women's Clinic on Irving Park Road. And I was with my friend Donna Rozeski, and it was a Saturday morning in July, back in the 1980s. And so we're standing outside of the abortion clinic, and there's a group of people walking around in front of the clinic, quietly praying the rosary. And a woman comes out of the clinic, and she's very tall. She's a very well-built woman, and she was wearing the telltale blue smock with the nameplate. So that means we know she's from the clinic. And she starts making fun of the people praying the rosary. And Donna, who was a fairly new convert to Catholicism, would have none of that. So Donna said something to the woman. And the woman, very big and tall, comes over and she says, "Oh, I know all about the Catholic Church myself. I happen to be a Roman Catholic nun." And we are like, "Huh? What? No, you're not. Come on, you're working in an abortion clinic. You're not a nun." "Oh, yes, I am." "What's your name?" "Sister Mary." Well, that sounds kind of cliche, but all right. And so we asked her what was her order, where was the mother house, and so on and so forth. And then I started kind of take a few steps back, and sort of sizing up this woman. There was a lot to size up, but well, short hair, she's wearing glasses, she has a certain kind of genteel comportment, she's intellectually confident, she obviously has education, and she knows a lot about the Catholic Church, and she kind of looks a little nunny. And without the habit, but you can kind of tell even without. I thought, okay, maybe she's not a nun now. Maybe she's run away from a novitiate or something. But there you go. So she insisted, "I am a nun." So the lesson. A question. Here's the thing: how bizarre can it get? Right? Here you are talking women out of abortions, and who walks out of a clinic? Somebody who identifies herself as a nun. The whole world has gone completely mad. Why are you working in an abortion clinic? How could you work in an abortion clinic? You say you're a nun. You say you're a Catholic. She gave us a nice long lesson, a philosophical lesson, which took me to a whole different level in terms of understanding what it is that we're fighting in this abortion war. She said, "I work here to protect the liberty of the women going in there." What do you mean protect their liberty? They don't have a right they're not free to choose to kill somebody. Her view was this: the most important human value, and by the way, if there's anyone here who is familiar with philosophy, you're going to see where this goes, right? The most important human value is the right to self-determination, the will to power, the ability to make choices and to decide who you are and what you want to be and what you want to do, completely free from from constrictions, from any other kind of somebody saying, "No, you can't do that." That's the highest human value. This goes back, of course, to those great philosophers of the 19th century, 20th century, 19th century, Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre, both, by the way, committed atheists. And their view was, what makes the human being human is the ability to choose. And we have to protect that liberty if we're going to protect human dignity. That's why Sister Mary is working in an abortion clinic. So we got onto the subject of, but the baby's human. The baby, and we talked about fetal development and the facts of fetal development, and we can show that the baby is human. Well, guess what, folks? Doesn't matter. This is the lesson. And I believe this is in some ways where we are even right now as a movement, what it is that we're fighting. We have believed as a movement, and rightly so, it's not like this is silly or something, that all we've got to do is prove to our enemies and prove to the world and prove to our society and so on. All we have to prove is that the unborn child is human and we win. Right? Even Roe v. Wade says something to that effect. But that's not enough anymore. We can, and I believe we have, proven that the unborn child is human. It's not enough. Why isn't that enough? Because of this other value that Sister Mary articulated. To protect human liberty trumps the humanity of the unborn child. So that's really what you're fighting, is a very perverted, skewed, corrupt idea of human liberty. The right to privacy that is really the foundation of Roe versus Wade is really what I call that the ethics of isolation, the right to privacy. The right to privacy in Roe v. Wade is a sphere, it's a zone that the court back in '73 surrounded a sphere of privacy around a single individual, namely the woman. The woman who is now, what? Under Roe, completely isolated from the rest of the human race. Disconnected. She stands alone. The autonomous woman. No husband, no boyfriend, no parents, no one to whom she is responsible. Now, in her zone of privacy, she may exercise this radical liberty to kill another human being or to let that other human being live. It's completely up to her. In her zone of privacy, the autonomous woman exercising the ethics of isolation. And so what is abortion really about? Abortion is the dissolution of human communion. We are in a world now of radical individualism, radical autonomy. There is no human connection. That woman, that pregnant woman, and we exercise this philosophy 3,500 times a day. In every shrine of death erected to this ethics of isolation, the abortion chambers, where we can literally, ironically, in the woman who should be the center of human communion, we break ourselves apart. And she's the one that has to do it. I believe that the dissolution of culture means attack the woman and the whole thing falls down like a house of cards. So that's the first lesson. And when we left the clinic that day, I was in a kind of stupor. Oh my gosh, it's worse than I thought. We could prove all day long, win every argument that the unborn child is a human being, but with this other ethic at work, we have a lot more to do to reverse that corrupt view of human liberty and power, right? The second lesson. Well, I am a jailbird. I mean, gone to jail, been arrested, gone to court, gone to jail, and all of that's talked about in the book. The judicial system. In 1986, our organization, Citizens for a Pro-Life Society, organized the first rescue of aborted babies at an abortion clinic in Milwaukee, a clinic called Bread and Roses. And so we all got arrested. There were 14 of us. And 9 of us were charged with a new law that was specifically designed to stop people like us from doing what we were doing. The criminal trespass to a medical facility law. And so we were the first to be charged with it. So there we go. We go into court. And the lesson here really has to do with insanity. We believed, you go back to that rescue that we did in Chicago in 1978 with Joe Scheidler. We were so optimistic. And until we got into court. We thought, okay, we're doing this rescue and we're protecting the babies now, but we have a further fight ahead of us in which we could prevail. The court fight, because once we get into court, we're going to be allowed to say, we defended human life, and under the common law defense of necessity, we would be acquitted. Right? Not so. Here's the lesson. There are two truths. The truth that unborn children are real, that unborn children are human, and that unborn children suffer injustice when they are aborted. Then there's the other truth, the truth that the court invents. And we were denied, repeatedly denied, our defense of necessity under I would consider this one of the most insidious points of view you could ever come up against. The court, for example, in Milwaukee, after we did that rescue at Bread and Roses, and we tried again to get the defense of necessity, it works like this. You can't have a defense of necessity. Your motion is denied. Why? Because under the law, no injury occurs when unborn children or fetuses are aborted that you need to defend against. I'm not kidding. And according to the judge, truly, the unborn don't exist. There's no one there to defend. There's no injury that occurs in abortion that the law needs to even recognize. And in fact, Judge McMahon, she even said, therefore, the defendant's view is unreasonable. And the court need not grant their motion. We're the unreasonable ones. We get into the trial, we have no defense. We can defend ourselves, technicalities. We go into court and defend ourselves on principle, even though we have, at this point, not a leg to stand on. Only hoping that we can, get in our testimony about the humanity of the child and the injustice of abortion and why we had to be there to defend them. And maybe there'll be some jurors who have a conscience. Right? Okay. So we get on the witness stand and we talk about abortion is the murder of innocent human life and abortion is the dismemberment of human beings, and we felt that we had to block the doors, and the judge, McMahon, stops the trial. She sends the jury out of the court. We're going like, what is going on? Then she reprimanded our attorneys and those defendants who did not have an attorney like me, pro se. So I get all the court lingo now. What was the problem? You have to instruct your clients to stop using language colored by opinion. What opinion? What words? So she banned the words abortion, abortionist, fetus, unborn baby, baby, abortion clinic, suction machine, killing, murder, dismemberment. I'm not kidding. It's like, is this America or what? So there you go. I felt like I was the only sane person in an insane asylum. That, to me, was what the court... See, here's the thing. The court system, when it comes to the issue of abortion, is corrupted by a lie. At the beginning of this whole thing, getting into court as a pro-lifer, you're getting into a system that is corrupted by a lie. And everything flows from the lie. What's the lie? That the unborn don't exist, that abortion causes no injury that this court need recognize. Abortion is a right, so how can you stop that right? By your actions, by blocking the doors to an abortion clinic. All lies. I remember being so frustrated by Judge McMahon's decision to deny our defense of necessity. I got out into the hallway, and a reporter from one of the Milwaukee papers, "So, what do you think about McMahon's decision?" And he's ready to write, "Well, maybe we should just plead insanity, since it's completely insane for people to block the doors to an abortion clinic for no good reason." So actually that got into the papers, so I was kind of happy about that. The third lesson. I am probably one of 50 people in the world who has had the experience of actually retrieving the remains of aborted babies from trash dumpsters, and then the photography that's involved, that we did. I want to tell you about one of these experiences that I had that I think has taught me the most important lesson, that I think has brought me inside the heart, the essence of the abortion problem, the abortion struggle. In 1988, which is, by the way, it is all talked about in the book, but in 1988, we found out that a pathology lab in Northbrook, Illinois, called VitalMed, was receiving by parcel post the remains of aborted babies. And these remains of aborted babies, the bodies of the babies, were being shipped to VitalMed from about 12 different abortion clinics all over the country. Now, how do we know that? The boxes in which we found the babies were marked with the postal address, the return address. So all of the addresses, the names and the addresses of the abortion. In other words, we found the babies in the boxes in which they were shipped to VitalMed. We found out about what was going on there at VitalMed because an anonymous employee, and to this day we don't know who this person was, but an anonymous employee of VitalMed called a pro-lifer in the Chicago area, Conrad Wudgener, who ran a cluster of crisis pregnancy centers. And she said, he said to Conrad, "You pro-life people need to do something." And so she told him that the pathology lab where she worked had all of these aborted babies shipped to them, theoretically for the purposes of pathology. But I can absolutely guarantee that zero pathology was being done on these bodies. This was a dumping ground for abortion. She told Conrad how to get into the loading dock area, what to expect, how to find the babies, and so on. Now, Northbrook, Illinois is halfway between Chicago and Milwaukee. I was living in Milwaukee at this time now because I was getting my Ph.D. So our group teamed up with the Pro-Life Action League, and so one week they would go, the other week we would go, because Northbrook was halfway between Milwaukee and Chicago. The first night that I went was February, in the dead of winter, snow on the ground, dark night. We get to the lab, which was it was located in an industrial park, and we go to a utility door that we were told was always open. Open the door, and then we are immediately confronted by a ramp. a very long ramp. And that building, that room that we entered was about the size of this room. So it's pretty large. So let's say the door is there, and then we walk down a ramp, and the ramp leads directly to a loading dock attached to the building. So walk down the ramp, we get closer and closer to the loading dock, and I'm beginning to see dozens and dozens of boxes strewn about in a haphazard fashion on the dock. We get up to the dock, we open up the boxes, and sure enough, they are literally filled with the remains of aborted babies. They are in if you read my book, you're going to get familiar with some language called whirl packs, okay? It's just a big fancy medical baggie. The babies were in these, most of them were in these whirl packs. The mother's names were on the bags, the gestational age of the aborted baby on the bags, and the date of the abortion. Sometimes even the abortionist. Dr. Klopfer, Dr. Marks, those are the two that I remember off the top of my head. Marks was in Raleigh, North Carolina. Dr. Klopfer was in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So you see, babies coming from all directions, winding up on a loading dock. Their boxes were marked for disposal, scribbled on the sides. And we found out that the babies were dumped on the loading dock, and they were going to be picked up by a commercial incinerator company and burnt with the trash. We did this retrieval project every week from February all the way through the month of October of 1988. At the end of it, we had over 5,000 bodies of aborted babies. And that sounds like a lot. But at that time, that represented one day's worth of abortions, surgical abortions. Well, on that night, the first night that we went to VitalMed, I was. By the way, I got to tell you, this was not the first time that I had retrieved bodies out of the trash, because I did it the year before. Behind the Michigan Avenue Medical Center in Chicago. So I was already well broken in. But I could still learn things. And I could learn things really deeply, even though I'd had already an incredible experience retrieving aborted babies. But I was struck when we came to that loading dock that night by how radically absurd this whole thing was. Here we were in an industrial park in Northbrook, Illinois, and picking up boxes of babies from Delaware and Indiana and North Dakota and North Carolina. What were they doing there? What was a human being's body that had been probably conceived hundreds and hundreds of miles away, winding up here, ready to be tossed out into the flames in the trash? And it really weighed deeply inside of me, a revelation. I was truly struck by a truth. Abortion was not just about the right to life. In other words, it wasn't just that these unborn children had suffered the deprivation of their right to life. Something else was wrong. And I said, it's not just that they suffered that deprivation. They've suffered something else even deeper. What is the real plight of these babies? And it struck me that the real plight of these unborn children, these aborted babies on the loading dock in Northbrook, Illinois, was loneliness. That was their true plight. Radical loneliness. They were completely disconnected from the human family. No mother, no father, no name, no place, no family, no one. And the analogy I use is the loading dock wasn't really a loading dock. The loading dock represents the edge of the world. What do I mean by that? I mean the very furthest point out from human communion, the edge of the world. That's where the unwanted go. And so our journey to Vital Med was a journey to the edge of the world. And I was very conscious in myself when we picked up a box and moved the box towards ourselves and picked up the box, that we were bringing them back. Right? We were, this was their first embrace that they would know. And another analogy would be that the loading dock was kind of like a raft. And someone put the unwanted on a raft, stacked them up, and then that raft is pushed out from the human family and is just then floating off, disconnected from us. That's abortion. So when we fight this war, this culture war, this moral war, this spiritual war, this human rights war, it's not only, even though this is, of course, huge, but it's not only that we are reestablishing the right to life. What you're really doing is you're putting the world back together. That world is broken and dismembered by abortion. You are actually advocating and taking a stand and living a witness for human communion. That's what we're doing. That's what needs to be done. And here's the other thing, though you probably already realize it. This war will not be won by thinking about it. It's going to be won by radical acts of love. And that means sacrifice. That means cultivating a sense of fearlessness. That means not allowing yourselves to be cowed by the other side or afraid of what the editorial will be on the front page of the paper. No. You have to work to restore human communion that's broken in the way that it's broken. And broken, the bodies, those dismembered bodies that you're showing on the street with your signs, they have literally written into their bodies the brokenness represented by our culture. They carry it in themselves. So we shouldn't allow ourselves to also ever be discouraged. Things can be dark. Things can be overwhelming. The evil can be very great, but you got to be careful. You can't allow evil to be so overwhelming that it petrifies you, right? What happens when you're petrified? You can't move. You don't know what to do. You're stuck. No. You just have to have faith in our God, the God of life. You have to have belief in the truth, speak it, and live it always. This will take care of itself if we do what we do. So I just want to encourage you about that, and I want to thank you already for the great commitment you have that you've made. It's the most important social justice cause of our time. So don't be afraid to be a part of it. and do something about it. And don't be afraid to allow the silent, invisible, unborn child to disturb you. We should be disturbed. God bless you all.